If you're struggling with critical social justice but find it hard to explain the problem to the people in your life, then this video is for you. The main thing to remember is that you are likely to be speaking to someone whose values are, in the broadest sense, progressive. This means that they want to continue making progress with eradicating prejudice, and rightly so. However, they probably believe that CSJ is more liberal than it actually is. Liberalism is the belief in the primacy of the individual, who should be able to reach their full potential and access universal human rights, freedoms and opportunities regardless of their identity. This ideology has underlain the progress made against racism, sexism, homophobia and more over the last 60 years or so. It underlies the laws which have criminalised discrimination by race and sex, decriminalised homosexuality and included same-sex couples within marriage. It has done so by reforming systems that already exist in order to enable more people to access and benefit from them. Liberalism also underpins the dramatic social changes which have led to a widespread consensus among people all over the political spectrum that such prejudices are stupid and unethical, and which made society hold people with such prejudices in low esteem. Consequently, by highlighting the illiberalness of CSJ, you will be well on your way to helping people understand the problems with it. Therefore, this breakdown, which is a simplification of one of Helen Pluckrose's full essays, will compare critical approaches to social justice with liberal ones in a way that you can explain simply to your well-intentioned friends and family members who are just not getting it. Critical social justice proponents generally believe that everybody has been unavoidably socialised into holding white supremacist, patriarchal, homophobic, imperialist views. Since they believe this, they also hold that everybody has a responsibility to recognise and dismantle these views in themselves, although this is never really fully achieved. While liberals believe that culture undeniably has influence, it also contains a variety of views that individuals can evaluate for themselves. Therefore, they do have both the ability to reject racist, sexist, homophobic or otherwise bigoted views and the moral responsibility to do so. CSJ advocates typically argue that knowledge is tied to identity and positions in society. Different identity groups are understood to have different knowledges. Those groups considered dominant are understood to have their knowledge recognised as legitimate, while other ways of knowing belonging to marginalised groups have been neglected. In practice, this often involves arguing that a reliance on evidence, reason and consistently liberal ethics is a way of knowing that belongs only to straight, white, Western men. Liberals usually believe that while perceptions and experiences certainly vary and also correlate to some extent with one's culture and status in society, knowledge does not break down so easily. They think that suggesting that some forms of knowledge are white or male and others are black or female is racial and gender essentialism that supports racism and sexism. In reality, if one really does listen to people of colour or women, one will find that they are quite ideologically and intellectually diverse. CSJ advocates tend to focus intensely on power dynamics and relate them to identity. They break identity groups into binaries and hierarchies, assuming that these are always in play in every situation. In an interaction between a man and a woman, the man is understood to have more power. Between a white person and a black person, the white person to have more power. Liberals are also concerned with addressing unjust power dynamics. The term liberal relates to freedom from oppressive power, but they tend to see more layers of complexity. They do not assume that oppressive power dynamics are always in play or that they always relate to identity characteristics. When power imbalances do exist, they look at them more granularly by including factors such as personality, wealth, profession, geography, as well as identity. This allows for more variables and options for finding solutions than simply assigning everything to white supremacy or patriarchy. Critical social justice activists are intensely focused on language which they see as discourses, ways of talking about things which can either uphold oppressive power systems or disrupt them. They believe that dominant discourses support white supremacist, patriarchal, homophobic, ableist, and other oppressive belief systems, and the expression of these discourses is largely responsible for maintaining unjust power balances. Therefore, they are inclined to police language closely and advocate for censorship and punishment of speech believed to perpetuate oppression. Liberals also believe that language is immensely powerful. However, they believe that its power lies largely in its use for the making of various arguments, which can be evaluated and compared on the grounds of evidence and ethics. Therefore, they oppose censorship and encourage the free exchange of ideas, including those with which they strongly disagree. Liberals believe there is much evidence that cultures which have done this have advanced most in knowledge and human rights. CSJ advocates are largely sceptical of the value of freedom of belief and speech and of viewpoint diversity, which they see as giving license to oppressive ideas to circulate, spread, and harm people. This is because they believe that they already hold the truth, and that to encourage or even allow variations from this to be expressed will impede social justice. This leads them to advocate for authoritarian trainings that retrain unconscious minds, and also forces affirmation of CSJ beliefs about race and gender rather than advocating for discussions of various viewpoints on them. It is this free speech skepticism that explains the cancel culture we see today. Liberals believe that freedom of belief and speech and viewpoint diversity are essential. This is because liberals believe in freedom of speech and belief as an individual liberty and viewpoint diversity as a valuable system of checks and balances. For example, a left-leaning liberal may disagree strongly with both Marxists and conservatives, but feel that critiques of capitalism or advocacy for the conservation of certain traditions needs to be included in the arguments to be considered. CSJ advocates may be critical of legal equality. Instead, they may prefer the concept of equity, which can include discriminating against certain groups which are seen as overrepresented in favour of those seen as underrepresented. They believe this is necessary to create a level playing field, after which discrimination will not be necessary. Liberals, on the other hand, support initiatives which aim to remove barriers which get in the way of certain groups accessing all the opportunities society has to offer. This can include providing more resources to communities or areas that lack resources. It does not usually extend to discriminating by race or sex or gender identity to even up outcomes. CSJs are profoundly sceptical of the concept of meritocracy precisely because they believe society is set up in such a way that it systematically disadvantages people from certain groups, including the invisible power systems perpetuated by dominant discourses. They believe the idea of succeeding on one's own hard work and abilities is at best naive and at worst a way to preserve white and male privilege and pretend everybody who is successful has earned their success. Liberals, on the other hand, see meritocracy as an ideal. The concept of liberal individualism and universalism and the removal of any barriers that prevent the individual from accessing all opportunities are the way to move us forward to a place where everybody can succeed on their own hard work and merits. This does not imply that liberals think that we have already perfectly achieved that. CSJ advocates believe that their theoretical approach is the only one that can work, because it aims to get to the root of inequalities by addressing people's minds, attitudes, biases, and speech. Social justice can only ever be achieved by revolutionising the way society is set up and getting everybody to recognise the invisible oppressive power systems they theorise exist. Everyone must commit to doing the work of dismantling their biases and conforming their minds, beliefs, and speech to critical social justice concepts. Liberals do not believe that the wholesale acceptance of this theoretical approach can work, although they do believe that input from CSJ arguments should be included in those to be evaluated. They believe the CSJ approach relies on faulty assumptions that lack evidence and are unfalsifiable. It also denies individual agency to accept or reject ideas and refuses to accept the possibility that any critique or alternative views could be valid, thus making it impossible to self-correct. Critical social justice advocates are strongly critical of liberalism because it aims to reform society by taking steps to open all the good things it has to offer to more people. They believe that liberalism is at worst dominant groups trying to preserve the status quo that suits them and, at best, a painfully slow grind towards progress when more revolutionary action is needed urgently to achieve justice for people suffering right now. They often believe that liberalism is the belief that society is already liberal and doesn't really need fixing. Liberals believe that liberalism has proven itself to work by producing legal and social change that has resulted in great advances in knowledge and equality and can continue to do so. Meanwhile, more revolutionary movements have demonstrably failed in both regards. Liberals reject the idea that liberalism is an attempt to preserve the status quo. They argue that it is actually a battle to fight off the many illiberalisms present in the status quo, and that CSJ is one of them. Consequently, liberals certainly do not believe that society is already liberal and in no need of fixing. On the contrary, liberalism will always be needed to fight various illiberalisms that continue to arise and threaten liberal societies. It is essential for the continuation of progress towards both greater knowledge and greater social justice.